Hi everyone, welcome back to the CH Tasting Salon. I'm Chris Lafleur.
I'm Katy Long.
And we hear you've got some Q's, we've got some A's. We're gonna answer the burning questions that you've had about all the wines that you enjoy from CH Wine.
Before we get started, we're gonna have a sip of wine. It'll really help lubricate the questioning and the answering. What did you pick today?
I went with Albarino from Lodi. I love Albarino. For me, it always feels like Pinot Grigio. But in Somm parlance, we think of it as Pinot Grigio, but prettier. It's got a nice floral element to it. And it's always easy drinking, great for the summer.
Awesome. I selected a Coonawarra Cabernet, so I'm going down under, mate.
Oh boy, oh girl. Let's not wait.
Why not?
Boop.
So swirling, we're oxygenating our wine. It's been in the bottle for anywhere from months to years, and so now we just pop the cork and we're gonna open it up. That oftentimes means that the wine is a little bit reticent at first. So we give it a swirl, which, as Chris is doing, it coats the side of the glass and it helps expose more of that oxygen. What do you think, reds or whites? Which ones need to be swirled more?
I would say that both benefit from a little swirl. I mean, if you're gonna do a tasting, the first thing you do is smell it, swirl it, and then smell it again to see how it changes. And personally, I think that reds benefit more. You know, they've got all those tannins in there that tend to keep the wine fresher for longer, but they also need to open up a little bit before you can really get into them. A swirl helps break them open a bit more.
All right, so swirling technique. So Chris, you take it down on the table.
So I come here, fingers on the bottom, nice and stable, gets a good swirl about halfway up. Wonderful. But hey, what if you don't have a table, Katy?
You know what? I'm not intimidated. So I'm doing a swirl just up in the air. Doesn't matter how vigorously, or if you're not quite so comfortable doing it so big, just a little bit slower, a little bit lower. All we're doing is just exposing that wine to a good bit of oxygen. But you can also, party trick, if you're ambidextrous, go lefty. Just don't be intimidated. Have fun, give it a shot. And look, we've all spilled wine before, so try it until you make it.
I'm gonna spill some today.
In your mouth?
Right now. So there's lots of information about wine. Not all of it is as vetted as others. So what are some misconceptions about wine or the business of wine that maybe we need to break open a bit?
You know, I think one of the biggest myths that I've seen is that you have to be a great taster. Wine tasting is all about pleasure. You're having a good time. You're hopefully doing this event with friends and family and pairing it with food. So I want to say, don't be intimidated with wine tasting, just have fun.
And I'm going to expand on that just a little bit. There is the notion that you have to be a super taster, some kind of genetic monstrosity, to jump into the wine world as a career. Well, I say the nay, sir. It is actually that if you have a lot more taste buds in the middle of your palate or on your tongue, then as a super taster, you're going to find wine is maybe too acidic for you, coffee's maybe too bitter for you, Coca-Cola is maybe too sweet for you. So it's all about training, not about being genetically gifted.
Another misconception about wine tasting is that if it's not expensive, it's not good. That couldn't be further from the truth. There's a wine for every occasion and an occasion for every wine. And look, some wines aren't meant for me. I just don't care for them. Doesn't mean that they're necessarily bad. So I say trust your judgment, find the wines that you like. And the world of wine is so broad. Keep trying until you find one that you do enjoy. I love that question of, you know, everyone is on a spectrum. They're on a journey. I'm on a journey of enjoying wine. And so the question is, can a novice or somebody who's new to wine appreciate the nuances and subtleties of wine as it ages? Well, first of all, looking to see what happens when a wine ages. If it's a red wine, the tannins are going to soften. If it's a white wine, it's going to get a little bit more complex and nutty. Now, not every wine is meant to do that. So picking a wine that is suitable for aging is, I think, part of the key. But then yes, wherever you are on your continuum of enjoyment, you'll be looking for complexity and balance and joy in that glass. So yes, I think that a novice can pick up some pretty cool stuff.
There's also a spectrum when we're talking about like how old does something have to be to really notice the difference? I mean, if you've got a wine that's just been bottled, in 3 months, that wine's going to be dramatically different from when you first opened it, or the next bottle you open. And then on the other side of that, if maybe you've got a wine that ages for 5 or even 10 years, well, then I think you'll certainly notice that there's a big difference there. Just in the oxidative notes, the nuttiness, like you said, and the color is going to change dramatically too.
Yeah. With red wines, as they do age, you're losing some of that tannin. It's just softening up a bit. But what you're also noticing is that some of that primary fruit, that juicy, fresh, really ripe fruit, as if you had just picked it off the vine, some of those flavors are going to be a little bit less prominent. You're going to get more of those earthy, tertiary qualities. And so it really comes down to, what do you enjoy about your wine? What makes wine enjoyable to you? So that's why we're recommending that you get a case of a wine and you open it maybe every 3 to 6 months and find when it's hitting its sweet spot, and then you go through the rest of the case right then and there.
Yeah, I mean, if you really like a wine, why would you only want to get one? You got to see what how it changes, and you got to want to drink it again for the parts that you do like. As they say on popular sitcoms, what's the deal with aerators? What do they actually do to the wine? How do they make it change?
I'm sorry, I just like... What's the deal with aerators? Who's saying this on which sitcoms?
Oh, it's everyone's favorite episode of Seinfeld, you know? The one where they go into the wine cellar and keeps asking about aerators obnoxiously.
So, Chris, what aeration? Aeration. So we've talked about swirling, aeration with wine. If you put an aerator on the bottle, it does, first of all, help you pour it so that you're not splashing everywhere and then dripping down the side of the bottle, which I've been known to do. But an aerator on top of the bottle just introduces a little bit of oxygen as it's coming out of the bottle. Now, that may be more beneficial for, say, a young red wine than, I don't know, say a young white wine. But I could be wrong. What do you think about aeration?
No, I think that's about true. I mean, generally, when you're talking about aeration, it means you want to take something that naturally occurs over time, like microoxidation, and you want to do it really fast. And that's what it does. So when you've got a wine that's meant to drink young, I don't know that it benefits from it. But if you've got a wine that takes a little bit of time and you just can't wait, then I think the aerator does a great service. It does kind of the same thing that decanting a wine does if you put it in a decanter. But if you don't have fancy glassware, or if you just don't like cleaning them, it's a good reason to have an aerator at home too, to do the same thing.
Well, and if you don't have an aerator, we can also do our own swirling. Just get some air in the glass right here. And all of this is just to find that spot where we're opening up the aromatics, whether it's a white wine or a red, so that we can enjoy this wine as it was meant to be, you know, created by the winemaker.
Absolutely. Get it to its sweet spot just a little earlier.
Wait, can you give us your very best obnoxious, like, give me your biggest, most robust
Okay, so
sipping?
I was teaching this yesterday, so we're going to let me get a little bit more pretentious, guys. Hang on, let me zero in. So when you're tasting a wine, you're gonna really want to try and focus if you can. Swirl it a little bit is great, but the best way to get a good sip on this. Perfect. Was that too obnoxious? But
let me give it a shot then.
Yeah, go for it.
So we're trying to see if we can make the loudest noise. This isn't always the best way to go. But, so what you did is you did a little sucking in of air technique to aerate it while it's in your palate. Let me see what I do.
Oh, good. That's good. I can hear it.
So I'm kind of almost chewing on it a little bit. And for me, that's because I'm trying not to spit it out on the table. It's mouth-watering and it's juicy, so my tongue is watering.
Just a master of technique. I love it.
Thank you.
It's a privilege to watch you work.
So while we're aerating, we're getting those delicate aromas to, we're gonna get technical here, to go retronasal. And that means that we're just exposing those volatile aromas to the back part of our palate, and they can, scientists will tell us, I'm not one, but scientists will tell us that your palate can taste maybe 5 or 6 different flavors, but your nose or your retronasal magical activity, you can taste something like 10,000 different aromas. So that's where we're getting a lot of the character of the wine. So however you do it, if you lean over and just try and get a little oxygen in that way, or as Chris did, sucked in a little bit of air, or as it looks like I'm chewing, whatever works for you, but get a little bit of oxygen into your wine and see how it evolves.
There's also a thing to look at, like by doing that, we're creating a more complete picture of the wine because I can smell it and that's keeping just the aromatics in the glass, and then I can taste it and I can feel it on my palate and see what the acidity and the tannins and everything are like. But by inhaling over it, retronasally inhaling to see what it tastes like and smells like together, that's a much more complete expression of what this wine is.
Let's talk about color. Wines of every color. So we've got white wines, we've got red wines, we've got orange wines, rosé wines. Where does color come from in wine? Chris?
Okay, lots of places, but primarily when we talk about color, I think we're talking about where it comes from with the skin. So if you've got a white wine, you generally don't vinify it on the skins, and that allows for it to be white and pretty much blank of color except for a little bit gold or hay or whatever. White wines, though, you can put into a barrel, it oxidizes, gets a little more gold. And then we pop over to rosés. Rosés are usually allowed to sit on the skins for only a couple of hours in some cases, and that gives them a little bit of a pink note, and then you let them continue to vinify on their own. Reds, of course, that's where the skins and the juice become best friends, sometimes for weeks at a time. In the case of some Barolos, we're talking like, 6 weeks minimum, I think?
Man, feels like forever.
Yeah. And from there, it's kind of death by degrees in red wine, because like some skins are really thick, some skins are really thin, and that'll depend on how dark it's going to be. Sometimes at a higher elevation, you get deeper pigmentation from the UV light. And then depending on how you vinify in general, like if you have a cold soak at the beginning, which is not fermenting the wines and keeping them in contact with the skins at a cold temperature to add a little bit more color, put a little bit of more purple in the mix. There are so many ways, but Katy, you're a winemaker. You probably understand this way better than I do. What do you think?
Well, I wouldn't call myself a winemaker.
Did you make a wine?
Dang it.
Yep.
Okay, so I love that answer. Chris, I think you've nailed it. So most grapes, even red and white, have clear juice on the inside. So if a wine has color, it's probably been in contact with the skins.
With the exception of a teinturier.
Say that twice.
Teinturier, teinturier, wherefore art thou teinturier? Teinturiers are red grapes that also have red flesh, so no matter when you press them, skins or no skins, they always come out a little red. There you go, have that, a little trivia for you. Katy, there's lots of vessels that you can age wine in. They have different effects. Let's talk a little bit about barrels versus stainless steel versus, dare I say it, concrete eggs. What?
Wow, Chris. I mean, the world of vessels is such an exciting one. Many winemaking decisions, of course, can vary the style of the ultimate wine by changing both the size and the shape, or even the material of the vessel. So what we are commonly familiar with big red wines is that they've been aged in maybe French oak in these 225 liter barrels, which is very typical in Bordeaux. So that's kind of where we've grown up with a lot of our ideas about oak here in the States. But there are so many different reasons to use something else. Oak, or even a porous material, which could include concrete eggs.
Yummy.
It's going to help with some of that controlled oxygen exchange. All of that's to say that it's helping those tannins integrate. It's also creating a little tiny bit of microoxygenation. So maturing the wine in the vessel determines some of the style.
I think that's a very accurate way of describing it, but we also have to think about stainless steel tanks. Oh, so we've moved away from wood in that case because stainless steel tanks don't allow as much oxygen exchange, and that way we can keep the wine very fruity and focused on its primary aromatics. So if you want a wine that's really focused and fresh, that's how you go. If you want a wine that's more balanced and nuanced, you probably want to put it in oak barrels. Would you say that's accurate?
I would. So for our friends out there outside of the tasting salon, what are some what are some wines that we could expect stainless steel produced? I might imagine a Sauvignon Blanc, something that's a little bit fresh and very fruit driven. What would be a white wine that's aged in oak or concrete? What would you expect?
For oak, almost always, I usually expect a Chardonnay to have some oak contact. I would say it's more the norm to have it in oak than to not. And that just seems to be because the flavors of Chardonnay, like the apple and pear and the pomaceous notes, meld really well with a little touch of vanilla, which usually you get from the vanillins and lactones in the oak barrel. I would also say that you can usually expect sometimes Chenin Blanc to be in new oak or neutral vessels, which could still be oak, but just might be used, so it doesn't impart flavor. And white Bordeaux often spends some time in new oak, which is also Sauvignon Blanc with a little Semillon,
Good
but
call.
a thoroughly different style.
Yeah. And then there are the red wines. So concrete, what would you expect out of maybe a wine that's aged in concrete?
Oh, okay. So I would expect there to be a little bit more oxygen exchange, which usually is going to mellow out the tannins on it. And the one that I see the most is a producer in Argentina called Zucardi that famously uses concrete eggs on a lot of their wines. So Malbec, which tends to be similarly bold like a Cabernet Sauvignon with big tannins, can be relaxed a little with the use of a concrete egg without imparting flavor and losing the nuance of like purple flowers you get out of a good Malbec.
So you get that fleshy texture without the oak influence.
Absolutely, yeah. Okay, so the question is there a wrong way to drink wine or like a wrong vessel to drink it out of? Katie, what you doing over there in your teacup?
Well, we're testing the theory.
Yeah, I guess the question is, can you drink wine out of a teacup? Looks like you can. Okay, so I guess the answer is there a wrong way? No. Is there a way that more fully appreciates the product? I would say that's true.
I don't like rules. I'm going to say, although, is there a wrong way to drink wine? In your car in front of an officer, probably a bad idea. Aside from that, we have a selection of vessels here, and it can be kind of fun to put the same wine into different glasses if you're looking to experiment and see what you get from the same wine out of the different vessels. There's a whole lot of science behind how that glass is shaped. The thinness of the lip is meant to either guide the wine on your palate so that it glides across, or have a really round nose and a bouquet that you can stick your nose in the glass and just experience the whole thing. But if you don't have these really specialized glasses, can you enjoy a wine? Heck yeah.
Absolutely, yes.
And as a side bonus, I think I look sophisticated drinking out of my
This is a good look for you.
Yep.
Yeah.
And you can even have this at work, and then nobody will know that you're drinking wine. Didn't
Especially
say
if
that.
you're a contractor and are not in an office, then it's easy to get away with. My own boss, myself, does not like it, but he's not looking right now.
My Zoom calls are amazing.
Yeah. So here's why I would say I think that this is the most effective way of fully enjoying the wine. If you want to see good color, then by being able to tilt this, I can see what it looks like on the rim versus what it looks like in the middle, and I can see right through the wine. If I want the wine to stay cold, then by having a stem, I don't touch it, and that doesn't heat it up. And if I want to swirl it, something like this, which has a tapered lip as well as a nice big bowl, is going to make it easier to swirl. Like Katie, I like your teacup idea, and the subterfuge of it in an office is wonderful, but it's going to be pretty hard to swirl that.
Yep, swirling in a teacup is a bit prohibitive, but again, just trying a different vessel, seeing what works. This wine is a little bit less aromatic out of this narrow flute than what I experienced out of the big glass. So
it's almost like with a flute like this, you want to have something that's naturally really effervescent, like say a sparkling wine that jumps out at you and you don't have to try and pull it out.
yeah, and it's also a little harder to swirl in this kind of a glass. But there's no wrong answer. Have fun. That's my rule.
Oh, and I would also say this. There are some people that will tell you there is a correct and incorrect vessel, even amongst different variations of this glass, where they all ultimately look similar, but maybe this is slightly wider, or maybe this is slightly longer, or it's got a shorter stem or no stem. When it comes to different wine glasses, there are people that will tell you there is a best glass, but I think that the best glass is whichever one you have in front of you. I don't think it matters dramatically for the best wine glass. So what is malolactic fermentation?
Ooh.
It sounds like a very in-depth question, but I think it's got a simple answer. So what do you think?
Well, I want to hear simple.
Okay, so imagine the feeling of biting into a green apple and that feeling of like the acidity,
Crunch,
the tartness,
juicy.
Crunch. Absolutely, kind of sharp. And then imagine the feeling of taking a big spoonful of Greek yogurt. Little tangy, pretty soft though.
Creamy.
Yeah, so malolactic fermentation, long story short, is just turning malic acid into lactic acid. But why would we do that, Katie?
So why would we want less of that acid, that bright, that super fresh, and maybe more of the creamy. Well, it adds complexity. All right, so here I'm a little sharp acid.
You're a little malic, sharp and green. Here comes the lactic, makes it more clean. No? Yes? Hey, there we go.
All right, bacteria eats the sharp acid, converts it to a softer acid. This is beneficial for mouthfeel. So one of the byproducts of malolactic conversion is softening those acids, but they create this manna protein, which gives more mouthfeel, gives a creamy sensation, softens some of those harsher acids, and can bring a wine into a different kind of better balance.
It can also create, I think, what is like a signature smell on a lot of Chardonnays, which is like the buttery, buttered popcorn kind of feel. So the byproduct of malolactic conversion is this thing called diacetyl, and it begins to be created, it floats up and gives you that buttery character. But as you continue through malolactic conversion, eventually the lactic bacteria remetabolizes the diacetyl. So if you go all the way through it, you lose the butter nose all over again. But if you go halfway, you get a balance of malic, lactic, and butter.
So that's partially why sometimes we've got different styles of Chardonnays.
Yeah.
So I don't think of maybe a Burgundian Chardonnay as being a buttery Chardonnay, but it has gone through most likely that malolactic conversion.
Yeah.
As opposed to a New World, maybe a California Chardonnay, I might expect more of that butter.
And it's always a winemaking style too, because you can choose how much butter you want by allowing it to go all the way through that conversion or stopping it.
And I think temperature of fermentation or conversion has a lot to do with it too.
Yeah. So butter, like it, have it. It's in your Chardonnay.